Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Pemko number 147D. This is a dark bronze anodized aluminum water return interlocking threshold. Sorry, I'm visually confirming that this is a okay, it is. We're all good. So the 147, it's representative of the profile of this threshold, a rather tall threshold that has an interlocking feature, which I'll describe in a moment, along with a water return principle. First of all, the 147 is all that I just mentioned and is available in the following finishes or colors, anodized colors over aluminum. You can get the 147 in A for mill aluminum. You can get it in BDG, bright dip gold, which would be a metallic brass color. D for dark bronze, which is this one, as seen here. G for gold, that would be a matte colored gold. SN for satin nickel, and that would be it for the 147. There is an image down below this video that shows the important dimensional properties of this item, and let's go over that now. As you can see, it's 4-inch wide, and then the overall height is 1.5 inches. And really where you're going to see a threshold like this is going to be in a residential application where you may have had carpeting at one time, and you remove that thick carpeting and pad, and remove that and put in hardwood floor, and you're stuck with a certain undercut on the door. One way to mitigate that is to put a taller threshold because you can't stretch that door, and it's not appropriate to consider the possibility of replacing the door. So you can go with a taller threshold, and maybe an interlock like this, certainly if it's an exterior door. So we've got the dimensional properties. Now, what is interlocking? A threshold like this is at least a 2-item assembly where you're going to have a hook strip. This is called a J-hook. If you use your imagination, you can see why we call it that. And that's intended to be nailed to the bottom of the door. And when the undercut of the door and the height of the threshold are all in concert, and this is attached to the bottom of the door, and you close the door, it will make an interlock just like you see there. That makes for an incredibly positive mechanical seal onto the bottom of the door. And interlocking thresholds like that are known to last decades because that metal, and this is a wipe coat galvanized steel piece of hardware. If you ordered a bronze threshold or solid brass, you would get a brass piece. But when it's aluminum, it'll be galvanized steel. Nails are included to attach that to the bottom of the door, naturally. And speaking of nails, screws are included for this as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Screws are included in the complementary finish. So when you nail that hook strip or that J-hook down to the bottom of the door, every time the door closes, makes for an incredibly positive mechanical seal. That is a tremendously long-lasting and effective way to keep out not only the elements like moisture. When you're interlocking like that, you're going to keep out the moisture. That's for the water. It may not be very high in the R value scale because you've got steel touching aluminum. It is effective at mechanically closing that off. Another reason, while let's say perhaps in Chicago you'd be interested to keep snow out, maybe in the Southwest where it doesn't get, in your area maybe it doesn't get that cold, you would be very interested to keep out critters like scorpions. That's a real thing, say in Arizona. People don't really care about keeping the snow out because they may not get much of it where they are, but they will get animals that they'd like to keep out of their house. Now, the interlock principle, effective as previously stated, you can also do an L angle as well. So the lip of that threshold, you could have an L-shaped interlock, an L-shaped hook strip that would mount to the face of the door and then drop down below and communicate with that lip. So obviously this is the interior of the door, and you're going to hook here. Okay, 1.5 inches. I might be looking for a 1 5/8 undercut. From the where the sill will sit to the bottom of the door, something in that range. That opening size on the hook strip there would be adequate to allow for that to connect by allowing or to communicate with each other, allowing that short edge to sneak underneath the portion of the threshold, and this to allow that lip to insert right into it. Okay. Now, water return is also included in the description. What does that mean? You'll take note that there is a trough back here, and that's what we call it. We call it a trough. You will also take note that I was studying or scanning for something previously, which I didn't see right away, but I did ultimately find it. There's a hole drilled right there, and there's probably another one. There is another one right here as well. Now, why are those holes drilled in your thresholds? That's an important question. Well, I'll tell you why that hole is there. There's more than just a hole, in fact. There is a couple of notches that are drilled in the face of your threshold. There's one right there. There's another one right here as well. So now I got a couple of holes drilled in the trough, and then a couple of slots filed in the leading face of the threshold. If any water were to get inside of that, it's going to hit the trough, through the hole, back out the notch, cut in the face of it, and outside. That's the water return principle. There is an option when you add this threshold to your cart, whether or not you want a water pan. You want the water pan. Why? That's going to be a thin gauge piece of sheet metal that's going to sit underneath the threshold and will act as a barrier as your water, if any, were to hit that underneath the trough area in here and then exit out the face. That's why you want the water pan, and it's so inexpensive that frankly you can discard it if you don't end up using it. But you would want some barrier between any moisture that will sit and gather over time on the top of your sill. You know, think of what that would look like in 15 years. It'll degrade anything that's in there, so you want that barrier put in there. So that's a good reason to have that. The 147 is listed in the site not only in the finishes that we had previously mentioned, but also lots of lengths. Everything from 2 foot to 8 foot are listed. You can have longer than that. We just don't list them because the cost to ship longer than 96 inch is generally prohibitive. If you have need for a custom length, by all means let us know by ordering the next longest piece or pieces, and simply indicate in the comment field the net length that you'd like for us to cut the material back to. And the reasoning is it will save you from having to cut this. You can see that some lubricant is required when they cut it and when they countersink it. So that'll be on there probably when you get it. You'll have to wipe that off. But it'll save you from having to cut, then re-countersink a hole. Now you can probably drill a hole, but sometimes countersinking proves to be the trouble when it comes to a client cutting it in the field, because they discover at that moment they don't have a large enough countersink, if one at all, or a large enough drill bit. Screws are included in a complimentary finish. So if you need a custom length, by all means let us know. Order the next longest piece or pieces and simply indicate in the comment field the length you'd like for us to cut the material back to, and we'll not only give you that first countersink at the proper distance from the edge, but the proper center to center as well. Give you those holes cut in the back, drilled in the back for the water return, and the slots filed in the face at the proper locations as well. And then of course your hook strip is going to come appropriate length. You're probably going to have to trim that regardless, but you can't have it all at the perfect length. About 1 inch, and then about a 1/4 inch, maybe pushing 5/16 for the hook strip. Now, the only downside really that a threshold like this has, and I just sold, a client emailed me a bunch of pictures saying that his threshold no longer worked, and all that happened, and this is very common. You've got a door that's literally decades old. The hook strip on the bottom of the door has fatigued. Over time they will fatigue, especially if the door has become ill-fit. If there's any sagging in the door, you'll want to mitigate that, because that will do nothing other than serve to bring to an early demise the integrity of the hook strip. So that item will get fatigued, especially around the nail holes. Or let's say someone's moving out or moving in, the house has been sold, furniture in and out, someone takes the door off, doesn't realize there's a piece of metal underneath there, puts it down, goes to rehang the door, and all of a sudden the door doesn't close. Looks down and realizes, oh my gosh, there's a piece of metal down there. The good news is you can just buy the hook strip, and people do it all the time. This client who emailed me all the photographs had that same sort of problem and said, wait, whoa, your threshold's good. We just need a new hook strip. So a epic problem went to just a really tiny problem. Door off the hinges, probably re-nail it back into the same holes. You're back in business for another half a century of good, healthy operation out of your door. The principle of an interlock is second to none in the sense that it will positively mechanically lock out anything that needs to come in. And given the fact that they will last decades, puts them, in my opinion, at the top of your list of what you should consider for an application where they're appropriate. Residential, not handicap required, or you generally won't see an interlock that's handicap compliant because they're taller. And one where you really need to be positive to lock the elements out, whether they be multi-legged or just snow and rain. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Pemko products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Pemko 147D interlocking threshold or any other Pemko product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.